Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is one United Nations agency doing to work with over 65 million refugees around the world? My guest today is going to bring us up to date on a very interesting operation they have underway and also a very unique agency. My guest today is Ms. Ninette Kelley. Ms. Ninette Kelley is a Canadian national, and she is the director of the United Nations Refugee Agency, which is part of the UN High Commission for Refugees.
That's right.
Ms. Ninette Kelley, welcome to today's Global Connections Television.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate you being with me. That's an acronym. We'll get rid of that in just a minute. The UN High Commission for Refugees, but it is a refugee agency. When was this agency started? Why was it formed? And what is your basic mission?
Well, it came into operation the 1st of January 1951, and it was created by the General Assembly here at the UN, and it was intended to help provide solutions to the remaining refugees from World War II, of which there were 1 million in Europe. So it was expected to be a short-lived organization. We were supposed to work with that group of refugees, find solutions for them, and then there'd be no need for us. But sadly, that isn't the case. And so our mandate has been progressively extended over the years, and our breadth of coverage has also increased as well. So today we're helping 22.5 million refugees in the world. We're helping over 10 million stateless persons. And we also join with other UN agencies to help persons who are displaced within their own countries. We call them internally displaced persons.
IDPs.
IDPs is the acronym
persons.
We're not supposed
We're not
to
going to use those,
right?
We promise not to do that.
No.
It's very true. I remember 10, 15 years ago when I was talking about or reading articles, we were talking about the UN High Commission for Refugees working with 10 million refugees, roughly. That figure has soared, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons.
That's right.
Before that, I do want to mention your website, www.unhcr.org. Our viewers can go to that and learn much more about what we're talking about today and some of the items we may not get to. Now, are you a 501c3? Can people donate to help refugees in various parts of the world?
They definitely can, and there's a donate page right on our website. And I really encourage people to go to the website, not just for where they can help, but also because we have great stories and important videos and news from around the world. So any situation, if you want to know more about it, you can go to our website and find out the information that you need.
When we pick up the newspaper or listen to the news, TV, radio, whatever it might be, we always hear about certain areas. We hear about Syria. It seems like we hear more about the Rohingya from Myanmar. What are 4 or 5 of the, I don't want to say the worst areas, but some of the most afflicted that are causing people to become refugees? Because there are many reasons for being a refugee, I guess, and we'll talk about those.
Sure. Well, one of the things people don't always appreciate is that over 55% of the world's refugees come from 3 countries.
3 countries?
Yes. Afghanistan, and they've been displaced for over 30 years, mostly residing in Pakistan and Iran. We have the Syria crisis, which is our largest refugee-producing crisis, over 5.5 million Syrian refugees and many millions, over 6.5 million displaced internally within Syria. And then we also have the South Sudan problem, of which there are now over 1 million refugees. So those are the major areas, but one that has been galvanizing a lot of attention of late, and rightly so, are the now close to 1 million refugees from Myanmar that have fled into Bangladesh. And that's a dramatic situation that's also unfolding before our eyes. You had asked earlier what are how the statistics today compared with 10 years ago. Well, a large reason for that is because of the Syria crisis. But for the Syria crisis, we wouldn't have had the 50% increase that we've seen over the last 10 years. So these are dramatic situations in the world that each person who is displaced reflects a level of individual drama and human suffering that's unimaginable to most of our lives.
Now, we look at Syria. You mentioned a large number of refugees there, or talk about the Rohingya who have gone into Bangladesh. This is a tremendous, it's a challenge for the refugee, for the internally displaced person, because that person's been uprooted. They've lost most of their worldly possessions, maybe even lost members of their family, and they're certainly not living a luxurious lifestyle, that's for sure, on the move and maybe in camps or things like that, but they are getting subsistence living. But what does that do to the countries that are providing assistance? Like Bangladesh is one of the least developed countries. It's as far for the gross domestic product. That's a tremendous burden, I guess. Is it not a financial burden on a country like that?
It's an incredible challenge. We've had over almost a million refugees, not quite, maybe 800,000 now, in a tiny sliver of land in Bangladesh, an inhospitable area that's subject to monsoons, and we've already seen, because of this large arrival of refugees, erosion and environmental degradation, a strain on services and infrastructure, which is why the international support to these countries becomes so important. If you look at Lebanon, for our American viewers, could fit within the state of Connecticut. It's a country of 4 million people. It's taken in 1 million refugees. So just imagine our neighborhoods all of a sudden having so many refugees who need help and need services. It's a great challenge, and it's often exacerbated by the fact that the conflict that produced the refugees also has economic consequences in the countries surrounding the country of conflict. So countries face not only economic consequences as a result of lost trade and economic activity, but as well they're having to shoulder an incredible responsibility with this large number of refugees.
It certainly is, and you talk about, well, Lebanon. I remember too. I've seen articles on Jordan. They is not almost half the country now composed of refugees. Jordan's a very small country with a small population.
Yes.
What's the situation there?
Well, there's around 659,000 refugees, and in Jordan, refugees live in large camps, and they live in urban areas. And like Lebanon, they're also very challenged by this arrival of a large number of refugees, and it hasn't been for 1 or 2 years. We're going into the 7th year of this conflict. So these countries need a lot of assistance, and some interesting things have happened over the years. The World Bank has come in with some financial instruments to help alleviate the burden. Of course, there's been a lot of humanitarian assistance, but certainly not enough to fully support these countries in the way that they need to be supported going forward.
What responsibility, it's very commendable that Bangladesh is taking in refugees, that Jordan is, Lebanon, other countries, and countries need to come together. And of course, a large part of that is under the UN roof or banner, however you want to put it, not under the flag per se, but certainly they work together with your agencies and your agency and other agencies. But what responsibility do you think that developed countries have to try to provide some assistance to these people and to help them at least maintain a basic standard of living and until they can actually go back to their country or wherever they may be going?
Well, the International Refugee Protection Regime, which, as I said, is now 67 years old, was based on the premise that this is international refugee protection and assistance is a shared responsibility. And in fact, things have happened over the years. We have humanitarian assistance that's based on that premise, development assistance, we've had resettlement programs, but it's never been enough. And in 2016, the 193 states came together here in the UN to reaffirm that principle of international responsibility sharing, and they passed a declaration called the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants. And basically it was a recognition that, yes, this is a shared responsibility, but so far it's being borne largely by a few states and those who are often the least able to bear it. So the whole idea was to marshal more predictable and sustainable support. Are we there yet? No. But we are making some progress, and we now have, in the UN system, we have consultations going on around a global compact for refugees that's to take that commitment even further and to find means for a more predictable sharing of responsibilities in the future.
And has this gotten a large amount of support from hopefully all 193 countries?
They all came together and said, yes, we recognize that's the case. And now we have to implement it. And they gave us some models. They said in this New York Declaration, there was a model of cooperation. It's called the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework. And at its core is to bring humanitarian help with development help to support not just refugees, but also the communities in which they live, and also to expand opportunities for solutions in other countries. So that framework exists. We've piloted it in a number of countries. We've learned some lessons. And so it's to take that further and say, well, how can we make that a more predictable model that's well-financed as we move forward in the years to come? Because unfortunately, the situations of forced displacement, they're not diminishing.
And that's a very logical approach to it, that comprehensive approach to have the humanitarian assistance and development assistance to help people to basically integrate it themselves into their society, their culture, whatever the case might be. What you mentioned, some of the lessons learned. We've all learned lessons every time we do something. What are some of the major ones that you've learned over the years since 1951, maybe going back a little too far, but what are some of the things we're doing differently today in helping refugees? Obviously the comprehensive approach is one of them. Are there other items?
Well, that's an interesting one, and I want to dwell on it for a second, because 5 years ago when we were in the Syria crisis, we could not, I knew because I was in Lebanon at the time, and it was very hard to get development actors in on the ground because Lebanon was a middle income country. They weren't used to working in emergency situations. So we've come a long way already to recognize that no, that needs to come together much sooner. And the World Bank does now have some financial mechanisms to provide that kind of support, and we're looking to broaden it. Other important developments, I would say, is to systematically include refugees in assessing and determining and telling us what they feel their needs are, their priority needs, the best way to go about addressing that, to ensure that our actions in countries are also very much locally government-led, that we have all the government ministries together moving forward. It's not just one agency or not, that we bring more resolutely into our work the private sector, which has enormous skills and can make opportunities that we ourselves cannot. Now we live in a digital age. There's amazing things we can do with technology, even in terms of getting education to children through tablets that we couldn't have dreamt to do 25 years ago.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program. The opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We would invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with any type of a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you just have a website and you like our shows and you want to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided free of charge as a public service to better help us understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at the refugee situation and what the UN Agency on Refugees is doing to try to alleviate some of these problems and to help people to get their lives back on track. My guest today is an expert on this particular agency. My guest today is Ms. Ninette Kelley. Ms. Ninette Kelley is the director of the UN Refugee Agency. We're talking about a variety of this comprehensive approach. And of course, the Refugee Agency has taken the lead over the years. It's been one of the most outstanding UN agencies, one of the largest too, I guess, as far as reaching out and helping people. Who are some of your other partners? You mentioned the World Bank. Are there other UN agencies, non-governmental organizations?
We don't do anything by ourselves.
Of course.
No, and it's got to be a collaborative affair, and if it's not, you're doomed.
Exactly.
So first of all, we work with the governments, of course. We work with our UN partners, UNICEF, the World UN Children's and Education Fund. We work with the World Food Program. We work with the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization and the UN Development Program. These are UN agencies that are often based in the countries in which we're all located, so we join forces. We work with international NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and local organizations. We work with civil society. As I said, private sector is an important partner for us, and of course, refugees as well. So we have over 900 partners around the world, and we simply could not do it alone, or we're all better when we bring our forces and our expertise together to solve a problem.
One trend we've seen over the past several years through a variety of areas, especially in combating climate change, promoting human rights, things like that. We've seen more and more private sector companies getting involved. How important is it for the private sector to get involved, and are they doing more? I know you mentioned that a few minutes ago, but are they getting on board more to provide assistance?
They are, and they can help us out in many different ways. Sometimes it's giving us a platform for which we can spread our message, and we've got lots of corporate sponsors that give us a place on their platform to express what it is we're doing and what are the needs of refugees. But we also have partners that try to get interest in their employers, in their employees, into causes, either to contribute their time or raise money for our cause. But often the most interesting kind of partnership we have with the private sector is where we have a specific problem that we need to be solved, and they bring their technical expertise to try to help us solve it. And as I said, that could be things like tablets for schools. It could be shelters for refugees. It could be logistics. How do we get supplies quickly and efficiently from one area to another? So our private sector partners are very valuable to us.
When we were talking about Syria, it brought to mind that there's several reasons for the Syrian conflict, but it seems like we're flashing back more and more to some of the root causes of refugee movement, different dislocations, if you will, economic locations, weather locations, dislocations, go back to climate change. And we're hearing more and more about climate change, and many people believe it's the #1 challenge we're confronting today for everybody on this planet, because the climate change is taking place. Are you seeing more and more climate change refugees, people who have been basically dispossessed because the climate has changed? Or in the case of Syria, that even goes back to climate farming and damming up rivers.
It was a contributing cause. There was a drought in Syria for many years. People lost their livelihoods. They went to the cities. They felt dispossessed. They didn't feel like their voices were always heard. They raised their voices, and it's a contributing cause. But yes, we see climate displacement. I mean, we see it on the news. We see hurricanes and earthquakes that cause people to flee. Oftentimes they flee within their own country, but certainly they do also flee across borders. So climate or natural disasters or disaster displacement is a contributing cause in addition to conflict. South Sudan's an interesting example. Last year, South Sudan is riven with conflict. It's produced over 1 million refugees and over that number of people internally displaced. And added to that, people were faced with a drought. So what we saw coming into Uganda and places like that were people fleeing death and violence, but also starving. So you can see how the causes are often compounded and multiplied in certain circumstances. But climate change is definitely something that we predict will lead to further displacement in the future.
When we read articles about refugees living in camps, we think, I guess some of us think, well, some of these camps may be 50, 100 families, something like that. But really, we're talking, in many cases, huge camps that are small cities. They're not little camps.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about the camps and some of the logistical challenges of setting these up and just serving 50,000 people at one time. 50,000, or if you have some that large, I don't know if you do, but some of them are very large.
Well, it is. It's a logistical, huge logistical challenge, and often it happens very quickly. I mean, I'd encourage your viewers again to go on our site and look at some of the aerial photographs over Bangladesh, because the camp in Bangladesh is just densely populated and massive, and you have to build roads, and you have to ensure housing is set up, and you have to ensure that there's fire breaks between housing, and you have to document all those people and ascertain their specific needs. So it takes a huge effort for us with our partners to be able to do that. But what's also a bit, it might seem counterintuitive, but often refugees who live outside camps, in urban and peri-urban environments, it often causes the most challenges because they're so dispersed, and they're not as easily accessible, or to identify or addressing their needs becomes complex because you're also working amidst other communities who also have pressing needs. So it's a dynamic that I have great admiration for my colleagues in the field, and every time I do go to the field, I feel a great sense of privilege to be working alongside people with such amazing know-how and dedication, and who are able to do what they do in the time frames that we're often given to do it.
And that's something that's often overlooked, that the UN, the vast majority of UN personnel, and the UN does not have that many personnel around the world, but the majority of them, or a large number, I won't say the majority, are working in some very dangerous areas. You mentioned the Refugee Agency, the World Food Program.
Absolutely.
We read about their drivers being killed.
Yes.
You've got 117,000 UN peacekeepers in some very dangerous areas of the world. And they're in the trenches, so to speak, on the front lines of dealing with these problems and hopefully trying to provide remedial assistance to the people to help them get their lives back on track. 65 million, 64 million refugees sounds like a daunting number, but I'm sure there are many successes too. What have you seen recently that will give us hope that things may improve in some areas? Maybe they're getting worse in some areas, but what are some of the successes as far as helping people to move back into their own communities or to relocate or whatever the case might be?
Well, there's lots of great stories, and if the world didn't care, we wouldn't have them to tell, because yes, the needs are huge, and the needs that are unmet, we have to always have our minds on. But every time we get children into school that have been out of school for 5 years or more, that's a success. Every time we manage to get through a period of monsoon where lives aren't lost, or we get food to people who are in desperate need, these are huge successes when we are able to help refugees get the skills they need to survive in the countries that they're in, but also help build their futures back home. These are important. Sadly, the number of solutions, the number of opportunities that refugees have had to go back home has diminished in recent years because the conflicts are prolonged. In Syria, for example, it's not the time for people to go and rebuild their country, as you can see from the news when you look. Myanmar looks a long way off, South Sudan as well. So these are our biggest refugee situations, Afghanistan, and sadly we're not seeing conditions that are conducive to return. Having said that, we do see refugees thriving, contributing to their communities, including here in the United States and elsewhere, which and they're inspiring. Those stories are really inspiring. They should inspire all of us to do as well as we can with the many riches that we have, because refugees have lost almost everything, and the fact that they can pick themselves up and contribute is hugely rewarding. So there are many successes. It's not a lost cause. If you were to go on our website, for example, and look at the Bangladesh situation, an individual reading that would know exactly what they could do to help. You know, $35 will help a family build a shelter that will resist the rain during the monsoon period. $50 would help refugees be able to have their utensils, their stoves to cook their food that they need. These are important contributions, and every time we have something like that, a refugee's life is made better, and they're able to carry on in more dignity than they have right now. So, yeah. If there weren't success stories, it would be hard to continue in this profession. But it's an incredibly inspiring work with lots of good stories to be heard and to be told.
And in the last 30 seconds we have, what is the number one challenge that the UN Refugee Agency has going forward?
It's peace.
Peace.
Yes, that's really the biggest challenge. We often feel like we're doing everything we can to address the consequences of war and conflict, and to do our best so that people can live as dignified lives as possible while they're outside their homelands. And it's often a challenge, and we're not always 100% successful. But the key is to have some of these conflicts resolved. And until that happens, we won't have a better story to tell.
And it's challenging to provide services to people when there is no war taking place, no conflicts underway.
There you go.
People are not shooting at each other, but it's even more of a challenge to do so when all of that is happening. And of course, that's a prerequisite, really a basic foundation for helping you do your job better. But Ms. Ninette Kelley, this is a very important operation that you have going, and of course it's helped save millions and millions of lives and improve the standard of living for many people too, to a large degree. And our viewers, as I mentioned, can go to www.unhcr.org and get more information on your program. But I want to thank you so much for a very
It's been a real
interesting
pleasure to be with you
very
today.
informative program.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.